Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well. So far, I have with me, in terms of panelists, I have Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hello.
And I have Jake marshalling. Hi, Jake.
Hi, everyone.
And I believe Kevin is joining us today, and Naomi, and also Gareth, but I haven't seen them as yet. But as we were discussing earlier, it's half term, and there's a lot of this thing called COVID knocking around. Here's Kevin now. Hi, Kevin. You're muted. Kevin. Hi, Gareth.
Hi, sorry, I'm having to come in on an iPad. BT just had to take a telephone pole down.
Right, no worries. So we're just kicking off. Now. Right. So I've gone through my usual introductions.
I think I've got a bad internet connection at the moment.
You have you, Kevin? Can you hear me? Jake, can you send Kevin a message to tell him that we can hear him and see him? He can't hear and see us.
I will do.
Thank you. Cheers. Right. Okay. So the first thing we would have done was go over to Kevin, but as he's not around, just to remind everyone, of course, if you're new to these, just raise your hand and we'll invite you in on the conversation, or you can put stuff in the chat box. But as Kevin's not here, I'm going to start something that we haven't looked at for quite a while, and I thought it might be useful to see how things are ticking over, which is the Beck stats. Yeah, the statistics of those cases. Hi, Laura. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Malcolm. Sorry.
That come in on the Beck's claims, and see whether those numbers had increased or not over the last few months. I stopped doing them because they seem to be holding sort of fairly steady, but I thought it might be worth having a quick look. So this one here is where people are just making that general inquiry. They want to know, could they stand any chance whatsoever of maybe claiming some local authority benefit? And this looks quite colourful at the moment because it includes all the years from 2018 to current year. So we can see that red one, which is the 2020, is really quite a big year where a lot of people were worrying. But the blue line there, which is the 2022, and with it a thinner line, which is a trend line. Just having a look to see, are people still coming in? And it looks like the numbers are more like the 2021 applications. It's been a fairly steep increase since March of people applying, and I suspect more than anything that's because of the cost of living crisis. If I just come to the next slide, I've just trimmed out there just 2021 and the 2022, so we can see that those numbers are looking fairly similar. I'm not too certain whether they'll drop off. They may do, because I think when we have a crisis like this, and we saw that in the previous slide as well for the previous years, the number of people making inquiries rockets up, and then after they've made the inquiry, they don't tend to inquire every week, because this would be the part of the Beck's claim that would just say absolutely no chance whatsoever of getting either council tax support or housing benefit. This is the calculation. This is the next stage, when fundamentally they could have an entitlement, but it would depend on some of their circumstances. So these are the shorter, easier questions that they get to begin with that tests whether they would have any kind of chance of a benefits claim. And again, those numbers are still following that same pattern. But what we'll see is, in terms of the calculation, we're really up into the 2018 area. So a fair number of people have dropped out from the previous one, but that's still quite high. And then if they get through the calculation, then they get asked whether they want to submit their claim. And what we can see here, of course, is that those numbers are quite high. And if we just look at CTR, we can see that the CTR claims are on a fairly steep rise at the moment and have been really since the beginning of the year. A slight drop around about week 8 there, but otherwise that trend line is continuing to go up, and actually an increase, which is something we hadn't seen when we were looking at them before. We now start to see an increase there for pensioners. Is that what you would expect, Gareth?
I'm not sure I expected. I think I can kind of understand it, partly because there's been a big drive towards increasing pension credit take up. TWP launched a campaign last week, I think, but there have been several kind of other smaller independent ones regionally, and people are not surprisingly tying pension credit and council tax reduction together because they're both very badly underclaimed, particularly by older owner occupiers. So maybe some of these campaigns actually work.
Laura, what do you think?
I have to say, I mean, I was looking at your graph and I agreed with you, and especially on the first one, Malcolm, it does seem to be tracking what's going on in 21, and that's definitely what's happening in Oxford. I think also the 150 quid conversation is also creating people to go to the council to ask for help. So going back to your point on the cost of living, where people are saying their bills are going to go up, and obviously the 5p the drop that Sunak put in there hasn't been made a difference at the gas pump. I think more people are claiming and seeing what they can get and applying to the council more often, and we're definitely seeing that through DHP as well.
Yeah, and Liz, I know you're no longer with a local authority, you're there with a housing association, but presumably these are what you would expect as well.
Well, I mean, I can't attest to absolute information, but yes, I would expect it. I think actually that there's probably more information around about things like certainly pension credit than there has been for a long time. I mean, you've only got to look at people like Martin Lewis, who is, of course, making sure that people know that pension credit. I mean, you come across it all over the internet as well. Claim pension credit, the most underclaimed benefit. You could get a certain amount of money, and yes, obviously, people are stretched, so they're interested in claiming more money, even if they don't like the process of claiming and they don't like benefit particularly.
Yeah, absolutely, and I guess probably the working age claims are on a fair increase there as well. Is that what you're finding at Mid Sussex, Kevin?
I only heard a part of that conversation because I've been having internet issues, so I only came in on the end of that. But all I can say is that at the moment, I think people are finding it tough.
Malcolm, we're quite static at Oxford. We're between 40 to 50 claims a week, but we've been like that now solidly ever since the big peak. We've been maybe the last 6 months quite static actually in terms of our take up. Our biggest issue has been supported accommodation and the shift in where our caseload and people are moving out of homeless and now being picked up by the council and moving into supported. And that's very much a problem from my area.
Is anybody else getting that? If you'd like to let us know if that's something they're similarly experiencing. Right. Okay. Sorry.
I'm just going to say, I mean, I don't know, but I think you could reasonably expect that to be the case. I presume by supported, do you mean temporary accommodation or do you actually mean supported accommodation?
No, I mean full-blown supported. So they're coming out of PA and they've got needs.
That is interesting.
Whether it's vulnerabilities or not. So obviously I've come back from 2 weeks off. I've got 4 schemes in my inbox to review, brand new schemes coming up, started the 1st of April. We're getting a hell of a lot of it.
Kirsty from Hammersmith and Fulham is feeling your pain as well, Laura. She's same situation at Hammersmith and Fulham.
I don't know if it's because lots of people are now hitting our radar, and maybe because of where councils have had to go out and outreach to people, there's less people slipping through the net. So maybe that demand was always there and we've never had it before. That was one of my positive thoughts, that maybe we're supporting more people now. Or maybe COVID has had a bigger impact than we think upon people's mental health or drug and alcohol problems, possibly DV. And that is going to be a repercussion for the next, let's say, 4 or 5 years, where people are going to be supported whilst they work through their new situations.
That's a good thought. What do you think, Gareth?
I really don't know. I'd hate to kind of overthink this one. I think it's probably that there are a lot of different reasons, and maybe just, you know, a series of little cycles that happen to coincide and give us a bit of a peak.
Okay, I'll move on. Kevin, are you okay to do your council tax and business rates update?
Not really much to report, Malcolm, apart from where we are with previous weeks. Council tax, Ukrainian families, which obviously impacts upon benefits as well. Obviously, the guidance came out the other Friday. Still no news on the £350 payments. Who's going to administer them? Whispers are it's county and unitaries, but we'll wait and see. The grants obviously finished on the 31st of March, but you still got the assurance and your reconciliations to do. I think I've just got ARG, the discretionary grant, to do now at Mid Sussex. And of course, I'll swear last, energy rebates and all the work with that, which I'm sure to a T is falling once again on revenues and benefit services again. So, as I said, nothing new in the last week, but it doesn't mean to say there won't be nothing new in the next few weeks.
I noticed the comment that that was put into the chat earlier in the week in the what it's called now.
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp, that's it. Yeah, WhatsApp. You see, I'm getting old now.
A bit too technical for you, Malcolm.
So, yeah, far too difficult now. Yeah, the WhatsApp, but I'm just glad everybody's names are on the screen here, otherwise I'd be really having trouble. Yeah, the WhatsApp group about, was it Chelmsford paying their staff,
Don't
their
start me
revenues and
off,
benefits
Malcolm.
staff? Yeah, they paid what,
it's not the only.
1,500.
That's not the highest payment I've heard of. I've actually heard of £2,000 in one authority. A number of authorities, although not all, have paid their revs and ben staff a honoraria payment for the extra work involved. I think staff have done work over and above their grades.
Yeah.
Some authorities are recognising it, other authorities are not, and that's all I'm prepared to say, Malcolm.
Yeah, that's fine. But it was a bit of good news, I thought, that maybe at least some authorities
it's
are
nice that some
recognising.
authorities are recognising it, but wouldn't it be nice if all authorities recognised it?
It would.
Or if the DWP recognised it.
I think we're struggling if our own authorities don't recognise it to start with, let alone the DWP.
Okay, let's move on, because we've got a few bits and pieces to discuss today. I've got a few slides here on universal credit. Just a reminder, of course, UC increases today by 3.1. How will people be able to spend that increase, Gareth? There'll be sport for choice, won't they?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are no pressures on people at all. I mean, it's just extra money they can blow on any kind of luxury holidays they might be thinking of taking. I'm just thought.
Yeah. It's anyway, good news. Now I'm on state pension. That's good news for me. Right. Okay. There was this end of life rule change as well. I don't know if any of you saw this. I assume you all did see it.
I don't think it applies to UC, Malcolm. We're talking about ESA, PIP, DLA, and that kind of things with the special cases thing. Not there are no special rules I can think of in UC.
It's just I saw UC in the note that came out. So
There'll be a consequential kind of knock on to people that get the other things, I think. Yeah.
But the main thing is the other things have increased by 6 months. Is that right?
I'm looking at this somewhat baffled because I'm not quite sure what it's talking about. There has been a change in the rules for when the terminal kind of expectation kicks in. They've changed the wording of it. It used to be that there was a sort of expected, effectively, or not surprised if somebody died within 6 months, and that's become 12 months. So I think maybe you've read somebody who was a bit confused.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
Gareth, can I ask a question?
You can. I may not be able to answer it.
No, well, I remember when the first 6 months rule came out, and then people received those hideous letters saying, "I'm sorry, you've not died quick enough. Can we have the money back?" Are they still aggressively, and I am going to use that word because I think it's a very overzealous idea, aggressively sending those out on 12 months still?
No. I mean, I think the understanding has been gained by DWP that wasn't a very sensible thing to do, and certainly now there isn't anything which says you must die within 12 months. It's effectively saying to the medical professionals, you wouldn't be surprised if they died within 12 months.
Oh, I see.
But
they're not asking people to pay back.
Not that I've come across, but then it's not my direct area of work. So, but I certainly haven't heard of any of that going on recently.
And is it right that people are no longer going to be subject to an in-person assessment?
Well, there's never been an in-person assessment for this. These kind of special cases, as they're called, have always operated on the whatever the relevant form is, DS 1500 or something, and that's generally just evidence from the doctor that's used to kind of determine whether they qualify for this sort of service, and people have been very cautious actually in trying not to send people letters saying, congratulations, here's some extra money because we're told you're expected to die soon. They haven't been doing that.
The early days of housing benefits, when we used to write to people saying, due to us changing your circumstances, i.e. you've died.
Yes.
I
always remember that. So just as an aside, I always remember one kind of system which I'm afraid we designed, where we always wanted to check answers. One of the questions that came up very early on in the session was, "Are you pregnant?" And if you answered no, it said, "Are you sure?" Which we changed very rapidly as well.
Yeah, I've never been certain of the answer to that question. Right, so this was the other story that I picked up, which is the return of managed migration, which presumably you have all picked up as well. So DWP ministers are about to restart managed migration. You may have thought it had gone away, but it appears it's coming back, and it's coming back from this spring, so pretty soon, and they plan to finish it by the end of 2024. It is going to start quite slowly with a cap of 10,000 people, but this is set to be lifted. And so they're going to start with tax credit claimants and then move on to everybody else as time goes on, moving first to disability and then other benefit claimants. But the idea is still that they're going to try and get everybody across by 2024. The Social Security Advisory Commission did warn that the change creates a significant risk for benefit claimants, many who have complex lives. And it also creates a risk for the DWP in delivering its plan. Laura, did you know about this?
Yes, but I have to say, only via Whitehall gossip on the conversation. It wasn't you this time, Kevin. But I had to tell you what, one of the things I thought about after the meeting that I had, and I didn't think about it at the time, is, are the CAB still going to be getting their money to help with this process? Because the conversation that I had with an unofficial conversation down the corridor was that they're going to be asking local councils to actively support this take up and how we promote the take up of universal credit, doing better by calcs in those good old days, and where we back up. Now, from my point of view at Oxford, that doesn't directly affect me because we have a welfare reform team. But those smaller councils that aren't the size of Oxford, that's going to be a massive burden once again on having that contact with people to say, are you better off? And then how do you coerce them in the active conversations that you're having with them about chasing your rent arrears or chasing your council tax arrears, for example? What they never said was, is the CAB is still in this process or not? It seems to me as if the DWP are just putting it back to the councils again.
The CAB have been dropped from their contracts from the beginning of April, Laura.
There you are. So Kevin, my question to you, again, off record conversation here. Do
We
you
are
think
on
that
record.
money, but do you think that money is still available, and is it going to come to the councils, or has it just been lost in the budgetary
councils
process?
won't get it. It'll go into the pot, and the councils will be expected to help. I did pick it up actually. It was some quiet legislation that came through that I picked up on one of the alerts. I'm not sure how Malcolm, but I did notify Malcolm, but he may have found out from other sources. But they've kept this one very quiet under the radar, haven't they?
They have. Liz, you want to join in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, of course, there are numerous adverts going around, certainly on the radio, in relation to we are moving people from tax credits over to universal credit by 2024. No mention of anything else, but it seems to me that they are encouraging people to do it themselves, so that they are encouraging people to use some of the more sophisticated benefit better buy calculators that are actually on the Gov.uk website.
So, Liz, from my point of view, what happened was I rang them up, the DWP, to complain about the landlord portal and universal credit, because we've manually got to go in of our 3,500 people that are in receipt and manually say what their new rent increase is. So I spoke to someone on the project team and they dropped into conversation. Oh, well, when you're putting it all on there and you're going against those other people that may have rent arrears and you notice they're not on universal credit, why don't you do a better buy calc? Of which that is a brilliant idea and all about a one government approach. But the issue for me is who's paying for that extra 10 minutes on the telephone whilst we sit there and work out on those wonderful calculators? Because some of these people aren't very good when it comes to using these I'm on this money, you're on that money conversation. And the burden comes back to the council again, and we're still not getting paid for it.
Yeah, I agree.
And don't forget,
they are
Laura,
quite complicated, and
Laura,
they do need some guidance to get through.
Yeah, don't forget, Laura, you've got elderly people 3 years after that too.
What do you mean? Oh, what, from a managed migration in terms of the rent collection?
The older people, they will go on to a sort of pension credit extra 3 years after the end of universal credit migration.
What do you mean by 3 years more? I'm being a
doofus.
doofus.
They're still committed to doing older people over to a form of universal credit, like a universal pension.
Do you really think that will happen, Kevin?
Well, whether it will happen or not, but they're committed to it.
But actually, prior to that, I mean, as it says here, they then plan to remove the cap and move on to disability and other benefit claimants. Well, we know that there are a significant number of those people on disability who actually lose through going on to universal credit.
It's not only that, but it's the timetable to what's the word? Ambitious.
Yeah.
Gareth, you want to say? I saw you swearing earlier, so.
Almost. Yeah, I mean, I was told 3 years ago by a very senior policy person that the housing credit and pension credit probably wasn't going to happen, but that now seems to have been reversed again, as Kevin says, and that's heading this way. In terms of the migration stuff generally, well, I mean, the Harrogate kind of experiment obviously had a huge number of people that they could learn evidence from. I think it was 13 in the end or something. I know that DWP have told SSAC that they think there's going to be an enormous amount of learning to get from this initial number of migration. But the reality, of course, is that there are, as Laura said, a large number of people who will be losing. disabled people, people with some capital who've been getting tax credits, and there are a number of people who will win, particularly people who are in sort of low-paid work with that lower threshold that's in now. But if there isn't anybody around that can tell them, whether they are winners or losers, there are going to be a number of very, very surprised and unhappy people, I think, coming out of it, again at a time when pressures are very large. And citizens advice bureaus are going to, they've got the next contract to carry on delivering this help to claim service, which is to help people claim the first time, but it's only going to be online and on the phone now. They've lost the face-to-face service that they were able to offer before. So I think things are bad, and DWP aren't making them better.
Nikki Duckworth, you want to join in? Join in, Nikki.
Hello. Yeah. I sort of more on the back of what Laura was saying. I don't know how aware you are, but we teamed up with PIP and CPAG and turned to us to actually ask the government to, really reconsider. Keep telling people to use the benefit calculators, not because any of them have anything wrong with them, but obviously, there's a whole lot of other stuff, exactly as you say, that needs considering. And Wendy, my colleague, is attending all the DWP meetings and they're saying nothing. They're just sort of bumbling ahead without telling people what the impact will be. We belong to MALG as well, and I know PIP do, and the Money Advice Liaison Group, and the debt people are saying, you've got to make people aware if they've got debts, what can be taken from universal credit, and that's the shifting sands, as you all know. It's a really complex programme, and we're quite upset that the DWP are promoting it so much. This voluntary migration, because at least with managed migration you should get transitional protection, but people's lack of understanding and the lack of clarity in the ads is quite hard. And as you say, Laura, it's going to end up with local authorities trying to advise people, and and we're changing our messaging. It's always been very clear that it's a lobster pot, and once you're in, you can't get out. And we don't want anybody to do that mistakenly and end up worse off. It's not a nice thing they're doing, I don't think. That's my personal view.
Hi, Nikki, it's Laura. Yeah, I'm at Oxford. So in terms of migration, I only have 1,000 more people to go, because I saw just under 1,200 go in 18 months under COVID changes. So we've got 1,000 to go, of which all of them are ESA.
Yeah, all complex.
All complex.
And these are the most vulnerable people, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is it's not necessarily about just shifting them onto the benefits. It's about explaining to them they've got to pay their rent. They're having their landlords continually on the phone each week saying to them, have you paid your rent yet? And it's those active conversations that where when you're on housing benefit, the housing association or your own housing stock just gets the money like normal. Where you've got cash flow problems, which councils do and housing associations do, by the DWP pushing this through, you're creating a business problem for another sector in the market.
Completely.
Malcolm, can I just ask something? Because when they had the pilot, when they meant to report back to the House of Commons on the success of that pilot, so what's happened to that?
Well, it was only 13, Kevin. I mean, it's not going to take long to write, is it?
Well, I would suggest it might cost a little bit more to write up than just the 13, because I just imagine a few people turned it down, Laura.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a naive question? What happens when, actually, I think the adverts are quite scary in a way, because they do completely say, well, if you make this change, you're stuck with it. And people are quite adverse to change, so I suspect people won't actually move voluntarily across to universal credit. What happens if they don't get the numbers that they want to achieve a complete clear out by 2024?
Well, I mean, that's one of those tricky ones, and I've got a second slide here because the chair of the of the committee is Stephen Bryan, who, of course, those of you who have watched this space know is really the architect of universal credit. And he's expressed the concern. He's saying there must be independent oversight and scrutiny, and he would be seeking further advice from experts over the plans to lift the 10,000 household cap. It does say they're not going to take a large-scale public consultation, but they will be seeking advice of a small number of experts. I don't know who those experts were, who would know this. But he is looking for people with expertise of agile processes and their governance. I mean, he went on to say that the public needs to have confidence in this process to minimise the risk. I mean, my reading between the lines on all of this is that Stephen Bryan, who obviously has a long history with universal credit, is saying, I don't think you can do it either, DWP.
And yet you've got the statement underneath.
Yeah, from the permanent secretary, Peter Schofield, who said back in November that he was determined to see universal credit fully rolled out by December 2024. Now, I can't remember, when is the next general election? Is that 2024 or 2025? You can remember, or will it be next?
I think it's next year, isn't it?
Next year. Yeah.
Well, I think if the Prime Minister does another visit to Ukraine, then it'll probably be next week.
Well, he did choose one of the safer places of the Ukraine to go visit, didn't he? Waited until the Russians
Well, you
had
can't
moved over to the
altogether blame
east
him for
before
that,
he
actually.
photo opportunity. Right. Anyway, we digress. What do we reckon, Gary Lazelle? Do you think that the DWP will manage the migration?
No, I don't think so, and I think that they're making public statements that that they know aren't going to be kept to. From what I've heard, people that I've spoke to, it's more likely to nudge a few years on from that. I think they're hoping, with the best will in the world, that people will naturally migrate rather than they do anything to force it. I think it's too much for them to take on. So no, 2024 doesn't even sort of register as being a real date as far as I'm concerned.
And does it just mean, Gary, do you think it's just going to be very raggedy as we get further towards that time?
Absolutely. I think that there's just, when we're talking about those sort of the most vulnerable people, I think that they're very, very scared of moving those people and forcing them to move. Yeah. And so they're hoping for more and more natural migration. I think they're really worried about that sort of that transitional element and how those people are going to be protected. And I don't think that they've got a real handle on how they're going to do that. So, yeah, it's just going to be pushed back and back.
But do you not think, going back to Liz's point, though, that if he's determined to make it by December 24, he'll just say, well, if you haven't moved by then, cut off, bang, Happy New Year, you're now on universal credit?
That's it. I don't think they can do that, can they? Because they can't. They just can't support those people to transit, because they're going to need an awful lot of hand holding. And I think that's what's going to come out between now and 2024. Is it's too complicated to move those people, and it's going to take an awful lot and local resources to be mobilised to be able to achieve it.
I think they need a legislative change as well to force people onto universal credit. Do they not?
They have the powers to do that managed migration bit. The only protection that people are going to get is that transition payment, and an awful lot of people won't get it. I think they've underestimated the difficulty in some particularly reasonable sized groups of people. Self-employed people on working tax credit who've got kind of resources over the 16k mark are really likely to cause a lot of problems, because of course they won't qualify for any UCs. There's no transitional protection there, and there are a lot of them, because there's all, particularly for small, low earning self-employed people, a genuine confusion between what are kind of personal resources and what are the business resources. And dealing with that is a nightmare already. Dealing with that when you've got tens of thousands of people on the same week being moved across is a recipe for disaster.
Okay, I see time's ticking on. I'm just going to run through a few cost of living. We can't go a week without mentioning cost of living, just a few cost of living things that have cropped up. These were specifically relating to local authorities, so I thought it would be worth raising. So, I mean, higher energy costs and wider inflation, etc. But the cost of finding contractors, they say, are going to rise. You experiencing those problems yet, Laura?
Yeah, that's an understatement.
And I mean, that's including providers of adult social care. They're keen to pass on the costs. So that 1.25 percentage point raise in national insurance is likely to come up through adult social care and all those areas. And supply chain problems, partially caused by Brexit, means that some contractors will only guarantee prices for a short period. That's probably more around the construction, I would say, than the local authority sort of like the benefits ones. But there will still be some issues around this. I mean, if construction is pushing that everything has to be signed and sealed in 2 weeks, or they're not going to hold prices, that will have an echo effect. And you know, I mean, certainly from Team Netsol's point of view, it always seems to take an awful lot longer than 2 weeks for a local authority to make up its mind. 2 months would be wonderful. But if there's pressures coming on, that could change things. Income from car parking has plummeted during the lockdown. And nobody's expecting full recovery from that. And Joanne Pitt over at Sitfa, she said local authorities should have to factor a 10 or 20% reduction in income coming in from all the other sources. Whilst you've got the A to D receiving the 150, but the LGA say that local authorities are under some pressure to expand council tax support schemes. So I suppose that's probably going to get lively, isn't it, Kevin, towards the back end of the year. And then there'll be...
Yes, it may do get lively before the end of the year, but
you won't
that's for others to see.
Right, and despite the government's promises of high wages, public sector employees will be expected to exercise constraint. So all of you who are thinking of asking for more than a small percentage increase, you'll have to control those urges. And then there's the higher interest rates, which are inflating borrowing costs. The Office for National Statistic figures show that the retail index was at 7.8 back in January, and the IFS says this could push central government spending on debt increases to about 69 billion this year, around 11 billion higher than the 58 billion forecast back in October's budget. So a lot of pressures, stuff that we don't normally talk about. I thought it's worth just depressing you all with that. So sorry about that. And I'll just mention LEP funding. LEP funding is being cut. The LEP complained about this. There's 39 of them across the country. They complained because it's going back to pre-COVID levels. They're saying there'll be redundancies at the LEPs, but more importantly, they're concerned that it will be difficult to find match funding with the lower amounts of money. I'm not really certain why there would be redundancies, because the government did confirm that they were going to retain their £375,000 core running costs for 2022-23. It's the funding money that is being dropped. They saw 22 million in 21-22, and it's going back to the 11 million that they normally get in 2022-23. But that will have impacts on, again, local economy and the potential for support for local businesses. which will have a knock-on effect, I guess, to business rates as well in an indirect kind of way. Won't it come in?
Yes, I think business rates over the next few years will get fascinating.
And on that basis, we've come to the end of our session. We're actually on time today. That's a first. Let me just say there won't be a session next week. There's some kind of religious festival going on next week. I can't remember which one it is. So we won't do one next Monday. It's a short week this week and then a short week next week. So I think we will miss it next Monday. But we'll be back the Monday following that. So can I wish you all a very happy Easter?
You too, Malcolm.
Yeah, don't eat too
I'll
many
just-
Easter eggs.
Yeah.
I just
we'll
point
see
out
you-
very quickly, Malcolm,
Yeah,
can I quickly point out that I just had a report in from somebody that says the final number of people moved in Harrogate was actually 38. So it's
Ooh.
much better than we thought originally.
Well, there you go.
Can I just say, has anyone done a poll of those 38 to see if they were happy or not?
They've said that there was no formal evaluation which they are able to share.
Oh, well, there you are, Kevin. If you don't ask, you don't report it.
Well, the DWP haven't been that keen to share it.
Well, on that cheery note, well, once again, wish you all very happy Easter and see you in a fortnight.
And
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.